Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Batchelor, and today we are joined by Auto Trader's brand director Mark Palmer to take a look at the new and used car markets. Hello, Mark.
Hello, James. Hello, everybody.
Lovely to have you on, Mark. Let's get straight into it then. I know Auto Trader, you've recently published the Road to 2030 report. So that's probably a good place to start, really. So what are you currently seeing in the used car market? What's currently happening right now?
Yeah, so our Road to 2030 report is an opportunity for us to take a read on what's happening in the electric car sort of move towards the Road to 2030, as the title suggests, obviously. So what we're seeing around electric cars, and we measure that in a few different ways. We talk about what's going on with demand, what is going on with a choice and availability, and then we normally look at some of the other factors around the progress towards electrification, things like charging and so on and so forth. And really what we're seeing, the headlines for the report this time round are, and we use data pretty much just from the Auto Trader platform, and what we're seeing is that in the new electric car market, demand has been falling a bit, actually, and it's been coming down since sort of September, October time, around the time of the mini budget increases in interest rates, inflation, and so on and so forth, just actually as electricity prices started to go up and so on. So headlines are new electric vehicle interest has been falling. Conversely, we're seeing demand for used electric cars actually up quite a bit, about 30% year on year. So there's been about 50% year on year. So there's been quite a lot of movement on that. So that's the picture as it is at the moment.
Of course, we all know what happened with Tesla at the beginning of the year. How much of an effect has that had? And are we still feeling the repercussions of that?
We are, yeah. It's really interesting. I would say that actually for some time, since the government announcements back in 2019, 2020, around the ban on sales of petrol and diesel by that year, by 2030, all the talk since then has been on new electric vehicles and share of the new car sales every year and so on and so forth. But actually, used has been a really, really interesting part of the market. It's obviously very, very, very immature is one thing I would say straight away, really immature. But we're just starting to see, this last 6 months, lots of supply come back into the market. And the reason I mention that is because when we consider Tesla's price changes at the beginning of this year, they have a really disproportionate effect. Tesla has had for some time a very disproportionate effect on the used electric car market for a couple of reasons. One of those big reasons is that loads of the available supply was Tesla for the last couple of years. So they on our platform, certainly, for a long time, they've taken up a big chunk of what's available. Only 2 or 3 models with any kind of longevity in the market. You've got Tesla as a brand, Nissan as a brand, and Renault as a brand, and everyone else has been quite late to it in terms of used cars. So what we've seen is, when something changes with a brand like Tesla, there is a quite an impact on the market, and there has been a ripple, as we would say. So what you find, of course, when Tesla pulls down its new car prices by the kind of level that it has, then there's a bit of an impact because suddenly used and new are sitting much closer together, and then there's a bit of a movement on Tesla used car prices, and then of course that brings those Teslas closer, doesn't it, to other brands and other cars that are available on the market. So people making different choices, suddenly that sort of aspirational Tesla become more affordable. I wouldn't say it's completely changed the whole market, but it certainly has had a bit of a ripple effect as we go through.
Yeah. Let's just talk a little bit about the new market, because I mean, you say there that demand has sort of come down a bit. I think to people like you and I and people watching this, they won't find that a surprise, but to the wider public, they might find that as a bit of a surprise, because there's new EVs joining the market all of the time. The market does seem to be quite buoyant. So are the reasons for this due to like the cost of living crisis? Perhaps there's poor supply of them. I mean, what are the reasons, do you think?
There are. When we review the data, we've seen on the platform, of all of the new cars available on the platform, electric has taken broadly the same kind of share of available cars for people to research and to buy. So there's anywhere between sort of 13 and 15% of all new cars on Auto Trader are battery electric. And that's been the case for about 18 months. So supply has been pretty consistent. It's kind of gone up with the market. So we don't see that as a big driver or negative impact, or at all, because that's been very, very stable. The key kind of things that we have been measuring is views of those cars. So of all of the views, and there were 5.5 million views of new cars on Auto Trader in March. There's loads and loads of new car demand. That's the number that's been falling. Now, it sounds a bit strange because that's been falling, and in the meantime, of course, we've been having good news, haven't we? On registrations, numbers have been coming out every month, and every year, every month there's a record and all that sort of thing. If we think about that for a second, vehicles registered in November, December, Jan, Feb, March were ordered probably a year ago.
Yes.
A year in advance. So you've got these massive long lead times for retail customers waiting for their car. The car gets registered. We're talking about people that might have ordered the car at the end of 2021 or early 2022. And that's what we see in the registrations figures from the SMMT, around now. So you get good news on one hand when it comes to registrations, but when we really look into the data, we have seen that demand figure tailing off as I said, the last 6 months. And that does coincide with the changes in household finances, which really sped up, didn't they? Remember September, October last year. We had a mini budget, we had increases in inflation, interest rates went higher, people have got less disposable income, and we've seen that tailing off in new electric demand. Now, it doesn't mean there isn't any interest. I mean, there's still quite a bit, there's still plenty, not as strong as it was, and the line on the chart isn't going in the way that we would like it to do, but certainly that is the point at which we started to see things wobble a little bit in the new market, and things have been a little bit tougher on the ground for retailers. Inquiry levels have been a little bit more difficult to come across. So that is anecdotally what we're hearing, and that's also what we're seeing in the data.
I'm particularly interested in the used EV sector here, really, because you say that demand is increasing, interest levels are increasing, and yet we hear from dealers, and we've heard from dealers at our own Car Dealer Live conference saying that they've been a bit sort of scared to actually stock EVs at the moment. So I mean, what is your advice to retailers watching this about stocking EVs at the moment?
Yeah, so first thing I would say is demand for used electric cars is definitely increasing. There is a growing market for used electric cars. That's really important to call that out, because I'm probably, like many businesses, we're lucky enough to get one of these feeds of what's happening in the news that's related to cars, and almost daily there's a story written by somebody that says, I've sold mine, I've got rid of mine, I'm not going to get one, all that sort of thing. Yeah. The headlines are very different to what we see in the data. Demand is definitely in rude health. The thing that's different, I guess, in terms of the metrics, is that supply is coming back a lot faster. And that will continue to be the case for a number of years as the market kind of stabilizes and finds its level. Because, of course, we've had all those new electric car registrations for the last few years. They're all now coming back into the market. And the more of them that are registered new, the more that are going to come back as used, of course. So this is coming. So the advice to retailers, number one, would be it's coming anyway. In fact, we've done some work, James, recently on forecasting the market. We've been saying this to retailers in a number of the meetings that we have, in forecasting the market out to 2027. Just indulge me for a second. The drop in new car registrations over the last 3 years amounts to about 2.5 million cars. So the market's going to be missing 2.5 million cars, just generally, because they were never registered new. So what you have there is an immediate impact in a few years' time on a 0 to 5-year-old car park. Yeah. There's a drop there of about sort of, as much as 35% over the next few years. Now, of course, because you've got an increase in the electric car mix over the last couple of years, when we look forward to 2027 again, what kinds of cars will be available in that 0 to 5-year-old park, which is heavily reduced? A bigger proportion of those are going, of course, to be electric. So if you're a retailer that sells cars, kind of 0 to 5, 0 to 6, 0 to 7, this is on its way. So that would be my advice. Number one is have a plan. What kind of plan do you need to have? Well, you need to know, understand the data. That is really, really key. And I have said this in a number of recent calls with retailers. Everybody's got lots of experience on petrol and diesel. what a car's going to be worth, you know what you should pay for it, you know how to sell it, whether you've got a market for it, what you'll make on it, that kind of thing. Instinctively, everybody's experience tells them that. But it's very, very different for electric because it is so completely new. So advice point number 2 is do your homework more than you've ever done your homework before. Because as I said, back to that demand point, there will be a market for electric cars in your local area, but really understanding where it is, what kind of vehicle people are looking for, how quickly it's likely to sell, and what kind of margin or what kind of price you can sell that car for, and what you should pay for it. And when you bring it in, those are the key things. And it's all very, very new, and it's still kind of a little bit volatile. So that would be advice point number 2. Make sure you really do your homework when using the right data.
Yeah. Lastly, Mark, I mean, it's more of a broad question in terms of the market, but over the past few years, we've seen the government sort of having a big effect on trying to help people switch to EVs, and we've also seen other governments and different government policies actually throttling back on assistance. I mean, what are you actually calling for the government to do to help with mass EV adoption?
Yeah, we have made some suggestions to government, and we're lucky enough to meet with people at OZEV and Department for Transport and the Treasury fairly frequently. And we do think there needs to be stimulus just to keep momentum going. This is a really important period, the next couple of years, for electrification and that road to 2030. So, we've made a couple of suggestions, maybe recommendations actually. A really simple one, for instance, is fairer charging costs. So the rate of VAT on home charging is 5%, and the rate on public charging is 20%. Now, electric car interest at the moment is being driven largely by the more affluent people who can afford these cars and can charge them at home. People with driveways. 80% of EVs are charged, on a driveway. Those people are paying 5% VAT, and those that don't have a driveway, they're faced with 20. So there's an easy sort of thing to kind of equalise and harmonise a VAT there. There are options as well for reducing the cost of electric cars, used electric cars specifically, and making them more affordable for more people. So things like reducing VAT or even eliminating VAT for a period on used electric cars is an option. Or interest-free loans. They've had that in Scotland, for instance, and there are other markets where that's been present. So interest-free loans to help people, especially with interest rates as they are at the moment, that's an option. And then the last thing, and this is really important, is kind of a more clear communication plan around one of the last barriers to used EV consideration. 51% of people who reject a used electric car tell us they're worried about whether paid. Now, all of the data that we've seen and conversations with counterparts and retailers of ours in Norway, and we were recently speaking to a number of bodies in Norway, they've told us over there that's not even been a consideration, not even a thing, battery degradation. And it hasn't manifested itself in cars and in the used market. But in the UK, people are worried about whether they will degrade. So we need to get that out of the way. And the way to do that is to provide evidence of the state of health of a battery and just let people know you don't need to worry about it. The car will perform in the way you need it to do. So those are the 3 things: harmonizing and making public charging VAT the same as it is on driveways, incentives to help people get into cars in the first place, and then communications and reassurance around some of those other barriers.
Mark, some fantastic stuff there. Thank you so much for coming on Car Dealer Live today.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for having me. See you again.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye-bye.